of my, I guess, like to play devil's advocate, skepticism of the ARK model is, how do you say this thing is worth $2 trillion when the technology doesn't even exist yet? How do you, is there some sort of caveat that's like, it might not be worth $2 trillion at all, we could be totally wrong? Or what gives you so much confidence to say this is really a huge opportunity, in the next 5 years, when a lot of other experts are saying it could take 10 or 15 years before true full, L5 autonomy hits?
Yeah, that's a great point. So we don't know like the exact timeline of when this is going to happen and when Tesla's going to solve it or when anyone will solve for full autonomy. What we do know is, if we look at sort of like the progression of deep learning, if you look at the recent DeepMind, the Google team, their win against 2 professional StarCraft players. If you were to look at what's happened in the past, you wouldn't expect them to be able to pull something like that off for a number of years.
Why do you say that you wouldn't expect that? Because I've heard you mention this exact same example before, and you say you wouldn't expect that. Why not? I would have expected them to beat the human eventually, right? Like it's the AI.
Yeah, basically, so this is like sort of like one of the core tenets of ARK, that you can't necessarily look at past progress to forecast the future. So if you look at past progress and you look at a game like StarCraft and compare it to Go and say, okay, I think it's a crazy order of magnitude more complicated. I want to say it's in the thousands. I don't have it in front of me though. So then you'd say, okay, like given improvements in Moore's law, maybe that'll happen in 10 years, but actually it's happening like a year or two later. So the time in between sort of like these big leaps and advances is shrinking relative to what you would expect, given Moore's law improvement rates. So we look at things like that and say, okay, deep learning could just surprise on the upside, and we can't predict it, but it seems more and more likely that it is a solvable problem. And then when we try to forecast things like this, I mean, this is such a large industry that even if we're wrong by, say, 20, 50%, I mean, okay, 2 trillion, it becomes 1 trillion. That's still a really large number. It's a really big market opportunity. Mm-hmm. And actually, we've sensitivity tested our model to say what happens if autonomous comes late. It comes, like 2 to 3 years later than we expect, and it takes twice as long to adopt. And that's exactly what happens. That 2 trillion becomes 1 trillion. But again, we still think it's big enough that it's worth investing in today.